So this is how it looks when you actually wear it. Look at this. Can you see the panel there depending on the angle? That particular section, the one with that slight iridescent shimmer, that spot is precisely where the display is projected. Hello everyone, it's Elho here. Many of you have mentioned that since Google I/O, there appears to have been quite a seismic shift with all the significant AI changes and device updates. Last time around, I did a review of Project Infinite, which is Samsung's XR device that's being developed to compete with Apple's Vision Pro headset. And I mentioned that its performance was really impressive. Now we're seeing the revival of Google Glass. The very Google Glass that was announced at Google I/O 13 years ago. Now they've actually integrated the display directly into real glasses for these extended reality devices. Currently, there are numerous startups in this specific field, but the one that is most widely recognized by the general public is Meta's Ray-Ban glasses. When comparing it to Ray-Ban, the experience was quite different because of this integrated display. I actually got to try it out myself. Are you currently wearing glasses like that right now? So, in the end, they approached this by using a device that is practical for everyday use, like glasses, and building upon that to improve the shortcomings of the Google Glass from 13 years ago. It's important to note that this has not been released as a final product yet, but as a prototype, so the key technologies implemented at this current level are LCOS and waveguide technology. This could potentially be a key factor that will drive the XR glasses market ahead in the future. Google, on their end, has just introduced Android XR for the initial time. It's the first Android operating system of the Gemini era, and by incorporating Android XR into glasses, they're collaborating with Samsung to make it happen. We're going to take a look at how these next-generation smart glasses could evolve, assess their actual utility, and I'll share my personal hands-on experience and my feelings about using them with you. So, let's begin. So here at the Immersible Lab, I actually got to see a demo of the Gemini version on an Android Auto based on the Kia EV9. And as I mentioned in my previous video, I also saw the XR device with a micro OLED display meant to compete with Apple Vision Pro. And here they integrated Google apps, which Apple Vision Pro still can't do actually. In that specific regard, I observed a significant advantage. And this time, after personally experiencing the XR glasses firsthand. Well, my friend, Dr. Shin Jong-yu from Level Up, who actually had the chance to try Google Glass a full 13 years ago, honestly told me, you know, for me, it's not really all that new or groundbreaking. That's what he mentioned, to be truthful. However, it's truly been 13 long years since then. During that period, diverse technologies have considerably advanced to enhance the extended reality experience by more effectively displaying on these glasses. In Korea, there's also a significant amount of business centered on these lenses. At Angel Science, they also worked on it, and as the technology keeps advancing, I thought, now it's finally going to be useful. Plus, Google is currently experiencing its prime with Gemini. Even when you benchmark it with AI, it's truly excellent and very useful, supporting LLM plus multimodality, making it a perfectly suitable product for glasses actually. Through these glasses, you can perceive things using the camera, then convert that video or image perception into text commands, essentially creating an agent to utilize a wide range of applications. There's certainly a distinction between the experience you get with a head-mounted display and the ease of use you find with these glasses. Gemini is incredibly adept at comprehending human language, and as I'll show you in a demonstration later on, it performs exceptionally well across all tasks, irrespective of the language. Therefore, utilizing these glasses offers substantial benefits. Back in the year 2012, when Google I/O announced these features, the design was very modern looking indeed. Now looking at it, it might seem a little bit too old-fashioned, but back then, it was truly groundbreaking. And during the I/O event, they demonstrated it live, but at that time, the concept of Android XR didn't even exist. The introduction of glass was quite significant, and even in recent interviews with the founders, they've mentioned that they hadn't fully considered aspects like the supply chain back then. So while the prototypes were very futuristic and experimental, this time they're aiming to commercialize it with the original established glass manufacturers. They're saying they'll collaborate with eyewear companies, and from the looks of it, they have placed a small computer inside the frame and managed the weight distribution well. On one side, there's a camera, and on the other, it seems they fitted an optical module for the display. Since I wasn't able to capture a close-up view, I'll proceed. But for these specific glasses to be fully functional throughout an entire day, the efficiency of the battery power is absolutely essential. The issue of heat generation is also a concern. You certainly don't want them to become uncomfortably warm while you're wearing them. Especially in hot weather, it can be really uncomfortable, so solving these issues is key before it hits the market. At the actual Google I/O, this is footage taken right at the I/O event, and you can see how much it has changed from 13 years ago. And you could actually experience firsthand the differences between the glass that was presented back then and the one that's available now. I think it was a point where you could really feel the advancements in usability. Because Google is making these devices, they might release their own devices that they have manufactured themselves. But like with smartphones, they might provide the operating system and let others build the devices, essentially creating an ecosystem. It's highly probable that they'll provide a prototype and suggest that companies like Samsung and others collaborate to develop their own versions of the glasses. In terms of interface, the most groundbreaking advancement is arguably the ability to interact intuitively with the Gemini AI using LLM, completely eliminating the need for buttons or touch controls. This is a significant step forward. Instead of relying on interfaces like keyboards or pressing buttons, this device understands your commands simply by speaking them them are loud, even with the fixed earphones that are integrated into the glasses. Furthermore, by incorporating a camera, it gains the capability to capture and process real-time visual information, while spoken instructions are transcribed into text for analysis. This touchless functionality eliminates the necessity for physical interaction. You can simply inquire, "Excuse me, what exactly is that?" effortlessly while wearing the device. "Okay, Google, show me the nearest cafe," and it pops up right in front of you. The display technology is evolving, and with built-in microphones and speakers also seeing significant improvements, the overall user experience is becoming considerably better. And with the advancement of smartphones throughout that process, various sensors have also greatly improved, like the inertial measurement units, the IMUs. So when I turn my head, how exactly am I supposed to see things? There's been significant progress in both the processes and the sensors that can interpret all of this information, and based on that, much like with head-up displays in cars, you can have navigation that you can just intuitively grasp when you look at it directly. The smart glasses market has actually been continuously developing, and although it seems like Google hasn't been active, they started with Google Glass and have been developing AR Core and other technologies. They have been experimenting with various prototype translation glasses, and it seems they are now re-entering the smart glasses market for the first time with the introduction of Android XR. The operating system is fully developed, and from an interface perspective, Gemini can interpret everything. Multimodality is fully supported. By using the camera for recognition and leveraging Google's various APIs, they can really maximize the application experiences, which makes these products seem quite marketable and viable, it appears. With the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, they really emphasize that fashionable, cool, and attractive look, you know. Introducing these Ray-Bans, they're priced at around $300. In Korean won, that's about 400,000. High-end sunglasses and similar products are usually that expensive. I think the capability to collaborate with well-known and popular eyewear frame design firms such as Gentle Monster and Warby Parker is certainly another significant point of interest. Ultimately, it seems that to use this, they don't want you to put on something completely new, like a head-mounted display. Instead, they want it to feel like you're just wearing your regular glasses with some added features. That appears to be the intended market position for these particular glasses. For Google, it's about integrating with Android-based smartphones, primarily because almost everyone carries a smartphone with them these days, right? So by offloading those more intensive computing tasks entirely to the smartphone, the glasses can then concentrate solely on the computing they are capable of handling. This will significantly improve battery life and also allow for better heat management. It is quite similar to the concept behind devices like smartwatches or smart rings. However, because these are glasses, I believe they will create many applications that can truly maximize the visual responsiveness of the user experience. And Google has tons of apps like Google Maps and more, actually. If you integrate those things, it could really shake up the market again. There are aspects like that. This display in particular actually just appeared like this. It shows up on one lens in this manner. It doesn't cover the whole area, just a specific section. It's typically referred to as an eye box, and this particular display appears to be utilizing an Elco's micro display. Of course, if you look here initially, it appears as though there's a display right here, but there is actually something projecting from the side, somewhat like a small beam projector. It appears they've constructed a configuration where they're able to project some kind of content onto an extremely small display. My reasoning for this is that during their presentation, they specifically utilized the phrase optical engine. What they mean by optical engine here is that they are using an optical engine. They've equipped it with a device capable of optically projecting something which is likely referred to as LCOS or liquid crystal on silicon. You're familiar with LCDS, correct? That's the liquid crystal display we often discuss. It's similar to that, but it's constructed on silicon. It's basically an LCD display that's been constructed on silicon. Now you might ask, why on silicon? Well, silicon is a semiconductor material, and semiconductors are capable of being manufactured in very small sizes. So in order to create a really very small display on the glasses, they utilize semiconductor technology to construct a liquid crystal display right on silicon. Previously, when discussing Google's XR devices like the Vision Pro, they used technologies called OLEDOS or micro OLED. They utilized OLEDS but built them on silicon. This is because it needs to be placed very close to the eyes. And since it must be miniaturized to that extent, the pixels need to be made very densely packed so that we can view it without experiencing the grid effect or screen door effect, which is why this is done. For glass, they actually create a distinct display on the right side, and then this display projects onto the lens. It's just like a very small beam projector is built right inside the glasses, and you can think of it as reflecting this image onto the lens. So not only is this the method used in Google Glass, but using liquid crystal on silicon is considered to be a very mature technology. So if you examine the fundamental structure, you'll see that apart from the portion at the bottom which forms the silicon, the cover glass on the upper section and the various layers within the liquid crystal display component are essentially quite comparable to the structural layout found in conventional LCDS. All these elements are the conditions that constitute this microdisplay, much like the Vision Pro or Google's XR device project, Project Iris, you know, the one they're doing together with Samsung and Qualcomm. In that situation, it's assumed those devices all use Sony's micro OLED. If there's a type that significantly increases PPI like OLED, then what about Elco's? In this particular case, it's been implemented using LCD liquid crystals. So that means you can pack more pixels into the same sized area, which makes it possible to make it much more compact, and actually LCD can get a lot brighter than OLED. It can reach higher maximum brightness, and since OLED has some weaknesses in terms of brightness, Elko's is more mature and produced in larger quantities. And actually, regarding the light source part, like with LCDS, there's a backlight, you know? Because the light source for the backlight is separate and this panel can be detached, it means that thermal management is somewhat easier to design for. But compared to OLED, the contrast ratio and things like that might not be as high, yet from the perspective of glass, considering various optimizations, even if the contrast ratio or the response time is a little bit slower, it seems glass could sufficiently handle these aspects. This is what it looks like when worn. Okay, take a look here. Can you see that panel over there, depending on the angle? That particular section that has a somewhat iridescent rainbow-like reflection is precisely the area where the display image is projected and reflected. What I'm aiming to discuss and highlight right now is this. When you observe this view, you can likely discern in this specific region the presence of the miniature projector unit that I mentioned earlier, which is conventionally known as Elko's. And when it projects that beam of light, it's what we typically refer to as a waveguide. In Korean, that term is dopakwan, which is a bit of a technical word. So what exactly am I trying to convey here? Now, when we mention LBS display, LBS is actually an abbreviation for laser beam scanner. And this specific section right here is where the light is emitted. There's a tiny display here that we want to project, but the actual part we need to focus on is the lens. The lens. When the light hits this part of the lens, it reflects. It travels through this waveguide, causing total internal reflection, and eventually reaches your eyes. Now, how is this even possible? You know, like with optical fibers. In optical fibers, you see, when light goes in, it doesn't simply refract and then exit. This is because the density of the material within the optical fiber is different compared to the density of the air outside. Instead, it undergoes total internal reflection, meaning it is completely reflected back inside. So the principle that keeps the signal intact in optical fibers is the same for the display. What we want is for the display right next to the lens to create an image, and then that display keeps projecting that image, and we want to bring that image right in front of our eyes. So by using total internal reflection repeatedly, we create this special material here. Here, it appears they're employing a diffractive waveguide. Ultimately, the Elko's generates the image, and as it continuously plays, it has to be compact to maintain a very slim and transparent glasses design, ensuring it's delivered directly to the wearer's eyes. So when we talk about the waveguide in these glasses lenses, you might think of it as a tube, but it's not really like that. You should just think of it as a lens. When light is precisely injected into that lens, the displays are then transmitted all the way through it, and finally, they are processed to come out to the eye at the very end of the path. As you can see, the original display is created, and then they make the light bend in a certain way. It keeps undergoing total internal reflection, reflecting, and then it gets diffracted and deflected just before it enters the eye so it can be delivered. So we assume they likely created a very small display unit, which is referred to as Elko's, because Google did not provide a precise explanation of how they constructed this particular hardware component when they conducted the demonstration. From Google's viewpoint, they developed this utilizing the Android XR operating system and Gemini, but the existing prototype hardware was actually constructed in partnership with other corporations such as Samsung, which is likely why they haven't provided precise details. In any case, the light reflects, and then approaches the eye. So by using Elko's and this waveguide, the display could be projected onto the lens, much like a head-up display in a vehicle. This enables us to view the reflected display, similar to how one might use a periscope or observe light through an optical fiber. So that eye box that I saw earlier in front of me, the image is projected into that eye box area right before your eyes, and it diffracts right there. So in this particular eye box area, it reflects through a rough surface to deliver the image right to your eyes. So by using these deflection waveguides, they can make the glasses incredibly thin and exceptionally lightweight. This means that from the perspective of the glass itself, or rather from the perspective of the eyeglasses, you can have this AI XR experience without noticing a significant difference compared to conventional glasses. This offers a distinct advantage. And when you simply position it onto the lens, you can see right through it clearly, allowing you to experience both the real world and the virtual world simultaneously. Now, are there any disadvantages to consider? We will need to investigate that aspect further. There are still significant technical challenges remaining. What you're seeing now, the product that I'm currently wearing, these glasses, they are not going to be released as is. This is merely a prototype model, so they attempted to create it in this particular format, and even if they do opt for a waveguide method, it's still quite uncertain whether they will ultimately utilize deflection waveguides or stick with the Elko's approach. They're still debating which technology to implement for commercialization, and although there's speculation about a launch in the latter half of this year or perhaps in 2026, it's worth recalling that the initial Google Glass was priced at $1,500. Of course, with the current inflation, the cost will certainly exceed $2,000, potentially making it considerably more expensive than Meta's Ray-Ban. Of course, Meta is also reportedly preparing a version that will include a display in it, so we can't really say this waveguide method is something only Google uses, but Google does have Gemini, you know. Well, since they're supporting multimodality with that application, it really needs to be cheaper than the Project Infinite headset, because it has significantly fewer functions compared to the Project Infinite Excel devices. But anyway, Gentle Monster, that's a company from our country, South Korea. And seeing collaborations with companies like Gentle Monster in Korea, which is very popular, or Warby Parker in the US, it reminds me of when Apple launched their Apple Watch. Many people said it wouldn't be used, but it's still very popular today. From the glasses perspective, people might say, I don't usually wear them, so why should I? However, if you can truly experience different applications with this, then it will definitely become a significant trend and a viable product. And it appears Google is also actively investing in this area. However, for Project Infinite previously, there were discussions mentions suggesting the use of Snapdragon, yet during the glass announcement the indication was that they were exclusively collaborating with Samsung. Of course, it's still possible that Qualcomm's Snapdragon XR chipset might be incorporated as the processor, but we'll need to wait and observe whether Google opts for its own internally designed processor or if Samsung's Exynos or a similar alternative will be utilized. It appears that because the device hasn't been completely put together yet, the processor collaboration also hasn't been fully settled. With glass, mass production is always crucial, as I always mention. When it comes to mass production, we need to carefully examine several key aspects, including how much the final price will be, how much heat the device will generate during operation, and importantly, how long the battery will last on a single charge. Based on my limited experience, having only had about a 10-minute hands-on trial, I can say that its performance utilizing Gemini was quite remarkable, especially in terms of conversational capabilities. It genuinely seems practical and ready for immediate use. If this comes out as a product, then it's really all about its durability, and just how long it's going to last. Right now, it provides real-time translation, so even if the two people wearing these glasses don't know each other's language, it translates instantly, even for languages like Hindi. How convenient is that? And even if it doesn't become mainstream, there will be specific professions that really need this. Because such jobs exist, it might just turn the market upside down for those particular areas. Certainly, many different prototype forms of glasses have existed previously, but as Google continues to develop the Android XR operating system, there will definitely be some very significant changes to anticipate, making these aspects particularly exciting. Especially because it utilizes diffractive waveguides, it can generate a rainbow-like effect, and that might appear slightly uncomfortable or noticeable to others observing from the outside. People might think, oh, they're wearing smart glasses, and it could appear a bit awkward. However, when you're actually wearing them, the display is not visible at all. This diffraction occurs at specific points, so from the outside you only perceive a square shape, but when I'm wearing them myself, I truly do not see that square area at all whatsoever. So regarding the user experience, there are no issues, but I anticipate that in the future these aspects will be addressed and enhanced through advancements in optical design. Not only LCOs, but also other display technologies such as OLEDs or micro LEDs could certainly be taken into consideration, so regarding the display component, it's essentially just a matter of substituting these particular parts. Furthermore, by utilizing waveguide technology, it's possible to directly implement it as a fully developed product, which is why I anticipate that it will likely be commercialized in this specific format. So in the end, developing Gemini this well means it can expand in both devices and operating systems. This LLM, which corresponds to the foundation model, will eventually take on the role of the operating system. For instance, folks using Windows have the ability to run applications based on Windows, giving it a really strong standing. The same holds true for Android XR. So Android XR, which is ultimately based on Gemini, is set to become an ecosystem OS. It's going to be a powerful platform, functioning as both an OS and incorporating an LLM based on Gemini. Google is essentially saying, based on this Android platform, specifically for Android XR devices, I will provide you with the operating system. You all can go ahead and develop XR glasses. Samsung can build them, and you all can too. But from Google's perspective, they're saying, just use Android XR. So, since various products are emerging, similar to how diverse Android operating system versions, including Galaxy, are introduced on smartphones, you can view this as a similar approach in their smartphone strategy. If that's not possible, please check out the reviews on foreign movie channels and the various videos we consistently upload. Also, on the Elho Engineering Instagram, we're posting short videos and fun clips that aren't on YouTube for you to enjoy. We summarize short news updates too, so make sure to get all the latest information from there. This has been Elho.